All right, Sir Richard, we are now at the end of the Biden administration. It's been a very interesting kind of mixed bag for the past 4 years, especially on the foreign policy front, right? You've got successes like Ukraine and the coalition, keeping the Europeans together on that. But you've also got things like Afghanistan, and then you've got this mixed bag in the Middle East of them not being able to exert influence where they wanted to in this conflict with Gaza and Israel. When you think people look back on Biden's foreign policy legacy, is it going to be a good one? Is it going to be a bad one? Is it too soon to tell? What's your take?
Not great, but better than Obama in terms of foreign policy. I know.
Explain, please.
Well, I think the problem with the overall sort of interpretation of Biden's foreign policy is he never really recovered from the catastrophe of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So that looked catastrophic. It made the US look catastrophic. And it sort of was demeaning for America and American power. And many of us were deeply upset by that. It wasn't a true projection of what America was really like, but it emboldened, let's say, autocrats globally. And therefore, the consequences of that were highly negative, I think.
Do you think Putin would have invaded Ukraine if Afghanistan hadn't gone the way it did?
Well, I think that's, hypothetical history in the extreme. But on the other hand, we all know about the red lines in Syria and the consequences of that. And I think it's fair to say that
you're talking about Obama saying if you use chemical weapons, that's a red line. And, we were actually waiting in the control room because we had been told he was going to make a statement on that issue and then never did. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Cameron, went with him, and I think the consequences of that were very disastrous at the time. And I think it's possible to say that if Putin had felt that he was confronted by a much more aggressive America, he would have been more cautious in his attitude towards Ukraine. And the problem with Biden's Ukraine policy, in my opinion, was too little, too late. So that sort of escalation of support was extremely cautious. If they'd gone in heavily right from day one, I think the outcome might have been very, very different. But this fear of Putin making nuclear threats, which I think have been shown to be hollow, was a misjudgment. So that's problematic. But on the other hand, the sustained support for Ukraine, the sustained support for Zelensky over time is creditable. And I think the other issue, which is puzzling, but I think a plus rather than a minus, is the way that Biden adopted Trump's China policy and really stuck by it and made, or let's say constructed, a much more realistic basis for the United States to deal with China, both as a trading partner, but also as a strategic competitor. But overall, I think one has to be equivocal. I mean, and the trouble is in the UK also, we didn't see Biden as a particular ally or friend of the United Kingdom. Well, I'll tell you that this is anecdotal rather than judgmental, but it's also important. I was pretty turned off by Biden's visit to Ireland when he nips off to Ireland to emphasize his Irishness, when his parentage is just as much English as it is Irish.
All right, but this is not this is obviously certain factions of the population are going to have a problem with this and others maybe not so much.
He never paid particular attention to his relationship with the UK, as Obama didn't either. And I feel much happier with Trump coming in because I know that he has an affection for and an understanding for the UK. And I think it will be a different story. Whereas, Biden was that type of American who had a sort of built-in disregard for the special relationship, is the way. Not that it happened in practice. I'm talking about him as it's a personal characteristic rather than a policy characteristic. But someone like me who's been in, I look to the States as a very close partner, not just politically, but sort of culturally and socially. And for me, it's a really important relationship. And when presidents don't respond to that, I feel disappointed.
I'll pass that along next time I'm at 1600 Pennsylvania to the new guys taking over. I'll let them know how you feel.
Yeah, when you're next time in the White House. Yeah, yeah. Well, I've had personal contact with one president at least, and I can say that I would not make that criticism of him.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously what you get is you may get a more special relationship with the UK, but you may get a more antagonistic relationship with NATO.
You may, but I think I agree with Trump on NATO. That's the problem. I mean, the whole business of America providing this defense umbrella free to European nations who then underspent on defense and spent on social programs and expected America to defense, to foot the bill for their strategic defense. Look, Trump was right to call out this 2% of GDP. Okay, he's now shouting out for 5%. Look, no one is going to go to 5% except perhaps Poland and the Baltic republics. The UK may manage to stretch to 3%. But essentially, he is right to say the Europeans should take much greater responsibility for their own defense. I don't think within that context he's saying, look, we're going to withdraw the sort of nuclear umbrella that America provides. But he is saying in terms of conventional capability, you've got to step up and show that you're serious about this. And, you look across some European nations, they're way, way behind the curve. Anyway, we could talk about that for a long time. But on that, I happen to agree with Trump's line. And it's a pity in a way that Biden didn't push it either, because now we're suffering the consequences of NATO not building up its expenditure fast enough.